All right, guys, what we're going to do is we are going to look at the basic forms. A lot of people want to argue that within basic forms, everything can be made up of 3 different forms. There's some people who stand on that side of it, and there's some people who stand on the side of 4. I stand on the side of 4 different forms. So what we're going to do is just really quickly, we're going to talk about how to construct those basic forms from a simple kind of front and slightly above view. I may show you some below view stuff too. So basic forms that we're looking at when we're talking about constructing forms are going to be as follows. So we've got tubular, that would be like a cylinder. And then you've got spheroid, cuboid, and then this is the one that kind of I like and some people don't, and that's conical. Okay, so tubular is, we're talking about a cylinder or a tube. Okay, I use the term tube because tubes can bend and things, but what we're talking about there is cylinders. Spheroids are overall round forms. Cuboids are going to be angled or cornered forms, and conical is going to be cones. All of these forms can have some wiggle to them. What we're going to do here in the beginning is we're just going to talk about the basic ones. I'm going to stop the video. That would be a good time for you to kind of sit back and practice drawing them, maybe drawing them from above, drawing them from below, and just playing around with it. I'm going to kind of go over the options of what you can do with them and just kind of address it from that angle. So tubular, very simple. One of the ways that I start to draw a cylinder, and I learned this by looking at drawing books as a kid, especially John Buscema. You could always tell in a lot of the drawing stuff that he did that when he started with a rectangle. So he would start with a rectangular form like that. So everything that we're going to start with is going to be based in form, or based in shape, and then we're going to turn it from shape to form. So he would go and start with a rectangle, but then you would see him begin to draw ellipses on the bottom. So when we talk about drawing these forms, what we're really talking about here is going from a flat shape to something 3-dimensional. So what you've got there is you've got first a rectangle, and then follow by 2 ellipses. And some people might refer to these as ovals. I think an ellipse, have always made sense to me for an ellipse to be referred to as an oval or a circle that's been squished down really small. Okay, so it's been smashed almost to the point of being flat. So that's when you get into ellipses in my term. Oval is going to be more of a larger type circle object like that. So I say ellipse. This is going to give me a front view. If I increase that ellipse to being more ovular like this, then what's happening is I am looking more at the top of my cylinder. So I'm seeing more of the top. And then when you get all the way to the top of the cylinder, you're essentially just looking at something that's round. Okay? So that's your basic tubular shape. If you want to pause the video now and practice that, it's not a terrible idea. And that's going to be the main point of all of this, is to see how to do it and then to practice. So if we just take that object and flip it over, instead of us looking down on the top of it, it's going to look like we're looking up through the bottom. So one more little correction. All right, if you want to pause it now and practice those, draw 4 or 5 of them, draw them on their side, that will be very helpful for you. Now let's talk about spheroid. This is really a simple one. Really, you just want to draw a circle. Now a spheroid, the thing about a spheroid that makes it a spheroid is a spheroid or a sphere, you can just say sphere if you want, that concept is going to be based on what I call equator shading. Equator shading is going to be your halfway point, and it's going to be a very simple, it's light over here, it's dark over there kind of shading. So we get there like that, and that turns a regular shape into, or a regular circle, I guess, into a sphere. So that's really all you need to do. The further that your medium shading goes, your equator shading goes, the further it goes this way, the darker it's going to appear. And the less it goes, the lighter it's going to appear. So it's really a personal opinion, but you may want to pause the video here and practice drawing that shading line, that equator shading, that middle line, drawing that in different places. As it gets closer to the edge, you want to have more of a curve. As it gets further away from the edge, it's less of a curve. Think about a crescent moon. You may want to try to have kind of a spotlight area here and then shade around it. I'm not going to go into gradients or any of that stuff, but I am going to tell you to represent a spheroid. So something that's rounded all the way around. So not just curved, but rounded. To represent a spheroid, you have to add shading, otherwise it's just a shape. So like a teardrop is a spheroid. So if you do that, and then you do something here, now we have entered into the realm of 3 dimensions because we have added that singular shade to it. So again, spheroids, the main point is going to be this little sliver of shading. All right, so if you pause the video, you're back. If you didn't, you're just watching. Now we're going to get into cuboids. Cuboids are really interesting because it takes practice to be able to draw these accurately. One of the ways you can practice is by using 2-point and 1-point perspective. 2-point's going to be a little bit more realistic than 1-point perspective. 1-point perspective is really based on the idea of a shape. So you start by drawing a shape, and then you have a dot, and then you learn about the angles on something. But the idea that I would have a perfectly aligned vertical and horizontal shape in the world is pretty unrealistic to think about. So this will give you an idea of the angles that you might want to draw, but in reality what we're looking at probably is something more like a 2-point perspective, which is where you connect things to 2 points. Or if you're down here below it, you have your 2 points, and that's going to help you get that sort of style. So that's kind of the style that I'm more shooting for when I look at cuboid. So with cuboid, just like the other ones, we're going to start with a shape. We're going to start with I believe it's called a rhombus. So basically you want to have sort of an offset square. I believe it's referred to as a rhombus. And then the angle is going to be up to you. This is what's going to determine the actual look of your cube or cuboid. So you can see I just go up with 2 kind of parallel-ish angles and then a vertical line, and then essentially I just want to cross these up in an angle that's going to be somewhere near parallel to these 2. And you can develop a style when drawing cubes. You can angle your sides in a little bit. You can kind of, I've seen people who kind of bend them in the middle and stuff do them. But when you're talking about a cuboid, you don't necessarily need shading to represent, although it does help sometimes to just add something as simple as that, and maybe it would be lighter on this side, whatever. But then you've got like also rectangular prisms, which are going to be kind of built in the same fashion. So you're there, and then you just have a longer side to it, and that's going to be a rectangular prism. These things come in handy a lot whenever we're drawing all kinds of things. Hands are a very interesting one, because a hand, when I'm kind of constructing a hand to start with, I'm always looking at sort of a pentagon-esque shape, and that's definitely going to be cuboid in nature here. So this is kind of where I start sometimes when I draw the palm of the hand, is that I draw a cuboid type shape, and it's a little bit more like this. So that cuboid shape is going to be more like that. Sorry, so I took the tip off of that a little bit. But just taking practice drawing cuboids, you know, one of the things that I think is a really fun kind of practice piece to do is to just take just free form shapes and then to just cuboid those out just by simply doing things like this. So you have to learn the parallel concepts and ideas. You have to learn what's going to be seen, what's not seen, and that just comes from practice. So we're just practicing the whole time, and then you can do fun stuff too, like where you make things hollow and play around with them. So practicing with cuboids is another really, really, really important kind of thing. So you want to pause. This is where you can really just lose yourself in time as practicing cuboids. So if you want to pause the video again and do some practice with that, or if you just want to keep watching, that's fine too. So let's just move on to conical now. So conical shape is really, this is where I think a lot of people get to argue, is they have the tubular on one side and the conical on the other. This really, to me, this is a big deal, a big difference, because when we're talking about conical, we're talking about, we still have that ellipse that we were playing with on here, but it's all based around that angled top that meets. So I know probably I don't recall ever seeing Buscema draw a cone, but I would imagine that when he did, he would start with the triangle and then add his ellipse to the bottom. That's the easiest way to do that. And this is one that to me is just a lot of fun, because you can move these and play with these so much. If you wanted to make it, just fill that in on the bottom like this, make it look like you can go up inside of it like it's a birthday hat. I used to always think about drawing a birthday hat when I drew these whenever I was a kid. So you might have, like, the little tie-on and the string, and you can just kind of look up inside of it, and it may be solid on the bottom, okay? You may be able to draw this thing upside down. And now instead it becomes, you can have somebody standing up on top of it, just kind of hanging out on top of it. There's so much that you can do with these. It's a lot of fun, but one of the things you do need to practice is that angle, just like we did over here on the tubular. The angle change becomes really, really interesting when we get into the conical stuff, because it really ceases to look like a cone as the angle changes, because it obstructs the tip of the cone. So this longer extended tip ends up getting rounded off more, and it almost looks just like a U or a really loose V when we draw it. So as that rotates down towards us, and of course from the bottom it's just going to be a circle, but as we rotate, this thing shortens. And that's one of the ideals of foreshortening, is that when something rotates towards you, it shortens in length. That is affected in cubes and cuboids, but the way it's affected is you just see more of one side. So it's not as difficult to draw as conical or tubular, because again with the tubular, as we see more of the top, then we shorten the sides down again. So practicing these two things can really work on your foreshortening, and you can really begin to put together some very interesting foreshortening stuff, where you might have something like this, and that can lead to an arm. And you put things together, and you can practice doing like a Mega Man style thing, where he's got a cool hand or whatever coming out from it, and you've got a hand and then the forearm and then a shoulder or a bicep or whatever, and then that can lead into drawing people. So it's one of those things where you just have to practice, and these are the basics. The more and more that you practice these, the better you get with them, the more confidence you're going to have when you're drawing these things. And when you have that confidence, you can begin to do really neat stuff with it. I'm going to post another video that is manipulating these forms to stack together or to twist and to turn. We're going to bend some of them. We're going to flatten things. We're going to smush them. We're going to make them hollow. We're going to do all kinds of stuff with them. So, practice, practice, practice is the main point of this. You want to be able to have the utmost confidence when you're drawing these objects out. You're not going to be, I always tell my students, you don't want to hope that it's going to turn out good. You want to know that it's going to turn out good. So you need to have the amount of practice together where you know that every single time you go to draw a cube, it's going to look like a cube, and there's no guesswork. So, if you got questions, maybe post something down there in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you about it. I try to be pretty good with that. but just practice, practice, practice.